How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Dead Jester Productions podcast, episode number 236. I'm your host, Josh, or J Moskers, joined this week by special guest Mike from the Oh Crap podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate you stopping by. It's going to be a fun time. Why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, what you got going on?
Yeah, well, I guess one of my big selling points when you were looking for guests was I was telling you, hey, so my wife and I have a podcast that's literally dedicated to just interviewing people for their funny, hilarious, disgusting, embarrassing poop stories. And it's been a ride. So as you can imagine, like not only does that make us a pretty unique pair of people to talk to, that tends to attract a whole lot of other pretty unique people.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine most people going online to share the stories of their fecal material, they got to be somewhat open, willing to discuss.
Yeah, and like I feel like we've really lucked out because like the people that come tend to be really good storytellers, and I have to think there's got to be a correlation between the kind of person who's willing to share that kind of stuff and their ability to do it well.
Yeah. That's awesome. What before we move on, what made you decide to base a podcast around that? Like, how did that idea come about?
I don't remember exactly. I know part of it was the fact that like in my family, if you get me, my siblings, my dad, grandparents, even, you get us together, we're going to usually start talking about poop stories in some way or another. My grandpa's got a couple that it runs in the family. And like my grandpa's got a couple that he refuses to record, partially because he says, I think that might make me legally liable in some way. So maybe I can paraphrase it. And then he has some plausible legal deniability there. But also like when I was sharing some of them with people, they were like, man, this would make a good podcast. And I thought, well, maybe it would. And so that idea just kind of brewed slowly after a while. And then, we started releasing earlier this year, and like really making a go of it. And, I've gotten some positive feedback with it. People telling me I'd say if I tell 5 people about it, 2 out of the 5 will say that sounds really funny and give it a listen and say that's hilarious. The other 2, maybe they don't get around to listening, but still say that's a really funny idea. And then you get that 1 out of 5 who's like, that sounds fucking gross. What are you doing? Why? And then my only answer I can tell them is, well, if you listen to our intro song, I have a clip of Danny DeVito's character, Frank Reynolds from Always Sunny, saying, because poop is funny. I think that says it all right there.
Awesome. I'm curious what your experience, I know you kind of touched on it, like what your experience has been like as far as the startup of your show and, just really getting the ball rolling. What's that been like for you?
I'm not going to lie. Like there were times where like it was pretty anxiety provoking. I think just my own insecurities at times overwhelming me, like making me feel like I'm afraid of success or something. If you can call talking about doo-doo success.
Yeah. Cause I mean, it's been, I don't know what, almost 4 years since we started this show. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing podcasts for years and years before then. And it's, I don't know. I even when I'm working with other people to help get the ball rolling, it doesn't feel like I'm just starting out. Like I just feel like I'm continuing on, but taking a step to the left or to the right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just sidestepping as opposed to taking it back from the start.
So yeah. It's an act of vulnerability. Like for me to, be posting about it as often as I do, as frequently as I do, like, and even though logically I'm prepared, okay, people probably aren't going to be as receptive as I would like them to be. It still can sting if there's no response or some pushback or something. So that was kind of the big hurdle for me to do that. But ultimately, like I said, I mean, who wouldn't like to see their podcast make some money off of it? But even if that doesn't happen, my wife and I are still happy to just do it. It's fun. And not only is it funny, we get to meet all sorts of interesting people as a result. Just to name a few off the top of my head. One of our upcoming episodes that'll be out roughly about 3 weeks from the day of this recording, roughly. We have an interview with a former EMT who shares some of her stories. Nice. A couple weeks ago, we interviewed a fellow who all the way in Europe, so he's by far our longest distance guest, who developed an app called Poop Mania And so he talked a little bit about that and some of his own personal experiences. We've got an interview coming up in a couple of weeks with a woman who goes by the name of Missy. She wrote a Kindle book on Amazon called Tales of a Phone Sex Girl, and so she's going to share some of the stories that are poop related, revolving around her time when she used to formerly work as a phone sex operator. And so like it's interesting, like this really it does connect us. Like it's just fun to to be able to form these connections with people that we otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah, I like what you're doing, and I also can appreciate the fact that you've got an actual niche that you're working out of. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
what we do here is so freeform. We've had people on from any end of the spectrum you can imagine, and on one of my previous shows I'd done, it was like video game centric, and it was more difficult in the sense of like I have to come up with unique things to talk about every week within that niche.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it was like doing this show is there are definitely points in time where I'm like, how am I going to discuss this? This is an area I know nothing about. Like it's so much more varied that there are times when I miss being able to just hang out in like one sort of niche topic. And I can
Yeah.
appreciate the way you guys are doing that. It's awesome.
Well, thanks for that.
Yeah. What I'm curious about, like, obviously you mentioned like sort of the nerves and like feeling like you're not living up to maybe your own expectations. What was it like for you, like learning how to like get started on the podcast and like the technical side of it?
um I mean, yeah, the learning curve wasn't fun, because I am still doing a lot of that on my own. We don't do any video stuff with it, but the audio editing is something that I think I'm still uh, learning to do better with. I feel like I got the gist of it now, but that's one of those things where you learn the basics pretty well, but there's the more advanced stuff you may not be quite as aware of. So there's that.
Yeah.
It was also kind of fun too because I guess on a similar note of like not some people can really dive into something and get really good at it, and sometimes I don't have the discipline or the time or the energy to do it. And an example of that is the handful of times I've just barely dipped my toes into like producing electronic music on like FL Studio or something.
Mm-hmm.
uh so like, but that being said, it was really fun to try to force myself to get to learn how to use it a little bit more, because the song that we have on there, it is a it's a public domain song. It's a classical piece from Vivaldi that I
Mm-hmm.
put drums over with it and the sounds and everything. So like that was another instance of me. Okay, like I usually dilly dally with this, but no, I have to actually learn how to use this stupid program, and maybe not to a professional level, but at least good enough to make this song sound the way I want it to. And it sounds pretty fun. And I appreciate, of course, the juxtaposed humor of it, of this classy piece with all these fart sounds laid over it. Because that's like, I feel like if I were to have a family crest, the Sherman family crest, it would be poop humor with an education written on it. Um, for the day that my grandpa passes, I'm planning to get a tattoo of him somewhere, and it's probably going to be a little poop emoji wearing a mortarboard, because this is a man that does love his lowbrow humor, but he's a really smart man. He's a retired physics professor.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I, talking from my own personal experience, like I know back in the day when I was first getting started with like YouTube and podcasts and just content creation in general, it on one hand the internet has like anything you can imagine, like you can figure out how to do it, go on YouTube and learn how to do something, or like Google like best audio editing software.
Yeah,
But the downside is there's so much information, it's just daunting, it's overwhelming at a point. And that was one of the issues I ran into, because people I would read like, oh, just use like Audacity, or just like Reaper is the one I use now. But GarageBand, that was the other one. I was trying to think of something back in the day that like, oh, just do that, it's free, it comes with your computer. And I'm
right.
just like, everyone just has all these different ideas and like what the best ways to do it. And I'm like, I just kept messing with it until I found one I was comfortable with, is what it ended up being.
That
I
makes
know a
sense.
lot of people, especially getting started on the YouTube side of thing. I was gonna say everyone bought what was it, Sony Vegas, but that's not the case. People just pirated it. But yeah, like Sony Vegas was the go-to back in the day. And I feel like now it's probably like Adobe Premiere is probably the go-to for most people, or Final Cut Pro X, one of those. Um, but yeah, figuring out like what the most, as long as you're comfortable with it, I think it just makes it so much easier, obviously. But uh, just getting a more like a fancier, more technical program just for the sake of having the options doesn't really benefit if you're struggling to figure it out, you know? And that was one
Right.
of the issues I ran into a lot, uh, especially with the audio editing. I forget, there was one in particular I tried using, and I just sat there and I was looking at the screen. And I was like, it's just a bunch of dials, dials and buttons. Couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I'm just gonna. At the time, I forget what I might have just been using, like Audacity or something. I was like, I'm just gonna go back to that. It's like 2 buttons I need to click to learn how to do stuff.
Yeah, and like in Audacity's got its stresses about it, but that's the one I end up using. I mean, because namely it is free, but it's relatively user friendly too, so gets the job
Yeah,
done.
exactly. And if it's working for you, there's no reason to change. You can peek around at other ones in the background if you want, but it, I don't like the added stress of like having to learn how to do something on a deadline. Because then I feel like I corner myself like, oh, I got it to work this way, so we're gonna keep doing it that way, as opposed to like maybe the most efficient, or the best way of doing it. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
you had mentioned too that you're only doing like the audio only side of things, which I think is a smart idea for now as well. I mean, again, it's just my personal opinion, but one of the things I've found over the years is whenever we've tried to do video podcasts, one, it makes it harder to edit the audio because you can't just cut and you know move things around as much because it's very jarring on camera then. But
Right.
also it's really helped us out as far as getting guests on. Like there have been so many people who are just either camera shy, or they don't like being on camera, whatever the reasoning is. And I feel like having audio only has really benefited us, and people that want to come on it, and they're way more relaxed because they don't have to worry about that other aspect of it, and they can
Right.
just sit there and talk.
Yeah, especially with our niche, we get, we, I say most people are pretty open about it, but we have gotten the occasional person who's like, yeah, I don't want my name out there, or at least I don't want my face. Maybe I can use a
Yeah.
pseudonym or something.
You're like, okay, got it. Just send me a picture and I'll make sure I don't use a photo of that person.
Yeah, just plaster it up, like ignore this man's face.
Yeah. See this guy here? It wasn't him.
We had one
So
guy that
don't
actually
ask questions.
he started off wanting to be, we haven't aired it yet, but he started off wanting to be more not showing his face, and then when we reassured him, well, we're not going to air it, he's like, I guess I can show you my face then, and he looked just like what's his face, Sam Turley from Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay.
And it was like, and I'm like, of course I'm making a joke like, oh yeah, that's the face of someone who really likes to mess his pants. Just just really razzing him.
Oh man. So
But we reassured him like, okay, even though he showed his face, like, no, we'll still use a pseudonym if that's something he's not brave, and we give him that option because it's only fair.
yeah, especially in situations like with what you're talking about too, where by default the situation can be highly embarrassing,
Yeah.
uh, as opposed to other situations like people come on here who are paramedics, film producers, whatever. I'm like, that's not really. No one's going to be embarrassed by having a wildly successful career.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it sucks. I'm living the life. It's hard. I don't want people to know.
Yeah, it's not, by its own nature, it's not
Yeah.
naturally as vulnerable as shitting yourself or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Oh man. But kind of going back to your show specifically. How, obviously, like people are going to come on, you're going to ask them like, so tell us like your story, this and that. How do
Yeah.
you go about prepping for your show? I'm curious if you, because like I can do research on like someone's like field or like their background, or whatever. It's like, how do you go about doing something comparable in your show?
Yeah. Okay. So if it's somebody that has something of their own that they're trying to, um, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Promote. Yeah, if somebody comes on with something that they're trying to promote, then I usually try to do a little bit of homework with that. Maybe listen to their podcast, or
Yeah.
look at their meme page or whatever. We had a very an award-winning illustrator on, and so I wanted to take a look at some of his stuff, and we bought a couple of his books and loved him. The illustrator's name is Ryan Estrada, by the way. So yeah, it's very humbling to think like, wow, like this guy collects literary and animation awards like
Yeah.
Pokemon. It's crazy, but he came on and shared his stuff. And so we, what else too? Something else I'll try to do. I guess you can, it's not really I guess it is a form of preparation, is that we begin each episode by going to Urban Dictionary, and I usually have a definition, a poop related definition of something in mind already, and we make a little game out of I read it for them, what the name is, what the title is, and then my wife and the guests will try to guess what it could possibly be. They'll try to infer that, and incidentally, that funny enough, that started off as me labeling my editing files as a way to just keep track of them. And then I thought, why not I just make this the episodes names? So
Nice.
you'll see the episodes, and they're named after the Urban Dictionary thing that we go into, Winnie the Poop, or Cliff Bar Poop, or Mud Pie, or whatever. So, and I try to have that connected to what's going on as much as possible. So like with the EMT we had on, the name of that episode is First Responder, because I just kind of Googled Urban Dictionary poop, like either medic or paramedic or EMT or something. And then, or maybe it was first responder I typed in. I forget what I typed in, but either way, that one came up. And there is a definition related to poop called a first responder. I can tell you what it is now, or you can go look it up. Or if you want to wait for the episode to play the game yourself.
Yeah, let's keep the suspense.
Yeah.
People go check that out. Don't want to spoil it here.
No, so that's about the extent of the prep I do.
Nice. No, that's cool. That makes sense. Yeah. I'm curious if has there been a time where you're talking to somebody and you're kind of like overwhelmed by their story, where maybe it's too much?
I mean, of course, like I'll find myself kind of gagging and cringing and whatnot, but I wouldn't say it's past a threshold where I'm like, okay, done, throwing in the towel, no more. My wife, not so much. Like she her threshold is much lower than mine. Just it gets gross. It's what we're talking about, especially if it's somebody who really knows how to paint a verbal picture with their their words there.
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with like personal experiences as well, because I'm not easily grossed out anymore, like by basically anything. I think some of that comes from like when I was in high school, working at a grocery store, and the area that I worked in was low income and just kind of run down. And I would work mostly during the days when we're busier, and all the time, like once a week at least, if not more often than that. The manager would come out and say, "Hey, we need you guys to go clean up the restroom. There's a clog," and we'd have to go in there and we'd look at it, and it'd be this dingy bowl, not it doesn't even look like porcelain anymore. It's like hard water, so it's all like rusted looking, and
God.
you just see it. It's just clogged. No one bothered to flush it. Just plungers there and everything. And I don't know how many times, like at the beginning, I'd go and I'd just be gagging. I wouldn't be able to do it. And I worked there like a year and a half maybe or something, and by the end of it, like we'd go in there, we'd wrap like garbage bags around our hands because the plunger just sucked for whatever reason, and we'd just be in there punching it down the hole just to clean it out. And it's terrible. But like just kind of got over it. Same thing with like, I mean, I have a dog now, but just I grew up with dogs, and like they would get sick sometimes, and I'd just be stuck cleaning up after them, and I just kind of got over like the bodily fluid thing.
No, I can respect that. I worked in custodial for about a year or so. When I was going to college, it was on campus, so and it was at the boys' dorms, and it was fucking disgusting.
Yeah.
I won't take up too much of your time with details, but you can check out my first episode for that, our inaugural one. But no, I get that it's gross, and you do become a bit desensitized to it. And like, I love how you're talking about how it's like almost a superpower at this point. Like I can handle it and other people can't. It's kind of like, when you watch a movie like Silence of the Lambs or something, and they're
Yeah.
trying to show how casual the the coroner is, and they usually have them eating in the room near these dead bodies. Like that's like the subtext
Yeah.
that they're saying is, yeah, they're eating their lunch around dead bodies, which to us is fucked up, but to them it's just Tuesday. That's kind
Yeah.
of how you are with poopy toilets now.
Yeah, I've got that 1,000 turd stare. It's just no ineffective at this point. It's like Daredevil or somebody like rolling around in the acid at the beginning. I gained the power.
That's your origin story.
Yeah, I rolled around in the
Just
muddy water a little too long, and
you're
here
just
we
immune
are.
to shit, and it's like immune to shit. Like how often is that power going to come into play? Like
It's just the
you're gonna
worst superpower ever. You're still working like a sewage treatment job.
you're gonna have like or like it's not like you're gonna have like a Batman villain crew that's like poop themed, and they're like,
Yeah,
boss, shit man's coming, and our shit bullets ain't working. What are we doing here?
yeah. It's just you're just basically Mike. Was it Mike Rowe? You're just working dirty jobs, but it's just slightly more tolerable.
It's like
It's not even serious. It's still you get dirty, you get filthy, but like you're not like vomiting by the end of it.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it like that. Like when I was in high school as well, I worked in a kitchen at a restaurant, and I was the dishwasher. Nowhere near as gross, mind you, but that was another thing where it's just you get like partially eaten bits of food back on the plates. You're washing it off. You're putting them through the machine, so you just
Mhm.
have this like mist of like partially eaten food just spraying all over you the entire evening.
Oh
You
yeah.
go home and like you shower, and it doesn't come off. Like you
Mm.
still it's terrible because it sticks to your clothes. Like I would just keep 2 or 3 outfits, and I would just those are my work outfits because you just can't get the smell out of them. It just clings to them, and it was yeah.
No, I get that.
I'd rather be punching the poop down the toilet than working as a dishwasher. Honestly,
Oh really?
it, I think that is just it's you just can't get rid of it. Like it's something where you're just there. You're just consumed by it. It's like you're just standing around the all night long, just constantly being sprayed in the face by this mist of food. And at least with the shit punching, it's like yeah, it's on a toilet, it's on a trash
Yeah.
bag, and you just go wash your hands when you're done. It's fine.
See, I also would dishwash and bus for a bit at a restaurant, but I didn't do it nearly as extensive as you. And again, they primarily had me doing busing, not dishwashing. So I guess I
Mhm.
didn't, I wasn't doing it long enough to get that veteran status that you're describing here.
I only did it probably like 4 or 5 months at most, maybe, before
Yeah.
I left to go to college.
Yeah, I did
But
it last. I did it while I was at college, and it was weird.
uh,
Like I worked for about a month, maybe a month and a half at this Mexican restaurant in town, and it was a weird time to get hired because the old ownership were selling it to the new ownership, and they were spending about a month or so helping them, like teaching them how to run it, teaching them the recipes and that kind of thing.
mhm,
And then one day I get called up just saying, "Yeah, just don't come in. We're just gonna we're gonna do another thing. We got he was kind of vague about it, and it sounded like he was just trying to put me down nice, saying like, yeah, we just don't want him here, whatever."
yeah,
But jokes on them because that place was around for years and they couldn't make it last another year. So I say
mhm.
that firing me was probably one of many things that they bungled. So
I don't want to say I contributed in a positive or negative way. I just I washed the dishes. I made I cut up the fries and prepped the salsa, and that was my involvement.
mhm.
But yeah, no, I don't know. I think it's like a lot of careers where you just kind of become jaded to it after a while. Referring back to
Yeah,
like the lack of gag reflex,
yeah,
like you said with the guys in like the bodies and things like that. Yeah, same thing with you know people in the medical field not reacting to blood and gore and things like that.
yeah. You kind of have to become a bit desensitized if you're gonna if you're gonna work with that, work through it.
Hmm.
Which I
Yeah, like
suppose yeah. Oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's probably a good enough segue to any other questions you had to ask about my professional life because I'm not a professional poop
Hmm.
talker. I'm an aspiring professional poop talker, but yeah, but I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah. Before we move on, I do want to move on to that, but what I was gonna say was like, uh, I feel like there's fine line between being desensitized to something and just willingly, you know, going into it. Because like I have family that all sorts of family that work in the medical field,
Mm.
and I know one of them they asked her like, "Oh, do you want to be awake for your surgery?" And she's like, "No." They're like, "Oh, we just assumed because you're in the medical field you'd like to see it." And she's like, I don't willingly need to, you know,
No.
put myself in those situations. It's just it's what I do."
Right. I
But
mean, I guess it's considerate that they ask, but it's like,
yeah,
no, no, like it's
uh,
not.
but yeah, you cycling back, you'd said you I know you said you work in like trauma therapy.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So I work in mental health. I'm a fully licensed social worker. I've been working as such or as a therapist for just over 10 years now, and I've got a few more, even some post or some pre grad years of experience before that. So I'd say all in all, what, like roughly 13 years experience in mental health.
Nice.
Um, and currently, like I said, working in all sorts of different settings, inpatient, outpatient, even working as a school social worker. Currently, right now, working in a ketamine clinic. So that has a kind of a medical adjacent. I mean, it is medical, but like it's not, as uh, let's say comprehensive as say like a hospital or an urgent care center or something like
Yeah.
that.
I would hope your urgent care centers are better than ours. Ours closes at like 2 in the afternoon here, which has been a problem.
Dude, what?
Yeah.
That is a problem. Like, not to mention, I'm pretty sure statistically speaking, most accidents happen in afternoon, evening. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I was at home. We were making wings for dinner. I made chocolate mousse for dessert, and we were cleaning up we have like one of those ninja blenders. I was cleaning that up, or I'd already washed it. And I was going to dry it. Had the towel, and it just kind of like got caught on the towel and twisted super quickly. Cut my thumb open. I didn't want to go to the doctor. I was like, I'll just
Oh,
pack it full of pepper, glue it shut or whatever afterwards. And but no, we went to urgent care, and they were closed. They were closed.
damn.
Ended up having to go over to the ER. This was during COVID. I forget how far into it we were,
Oh,
but
man.
that was annoying because it's like, all right, I'm just gonna sit in the emergency room surrounded by sick people. Well, well, I'm bleeding. Good
Oh,
stuff.
God. Yeah, that's, yeah, that's scary for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as I mentioned, to you, like, so my specialty is with trauma, which is especially
Mhm.
helpful in a ketamine clinic because, not, I mean, I would say that honestly, like of my caseload, I've got what, maybe at least 4 dozen people on my caseload, probably more, that I see on a weekly, biweekly basis. And
Mhm.
like, I can count on one hand the number of them that are also undergoing concurrent ketamine treatment.
Sure.
So it's not a lot of them, but it is especially helpful. Like the reason why I'm finding myself more and more drawn to trauma is because, like, for one, it's something I just kind of fell into with some of the jobs that I took on. Starting with when I was in a residential facility working with at-risk youth, and they were getting us trained in a technique that you may or may not be familiar with called EMDR.
Mhm.
And if you want to know more about that, I can come back and explain that a little bit more.
Sure.
But it's something else that's also been proven extremely effective with helping to resolve people's trauma.
Mhm.
And the more I work in this field, the more I'm seeing, yeah, everything seems to come back to trauma. I mean, not literally everything, but like so much stuff. And even the times where I try to keep myself in check and try to not be a hammer that views every problem as a nail, thinking that everything is trauma.
Mhm.
Even the times where I'm like, don't jump to conclusions. Then by like the second or third session, the client's like, by the way, this happened with my parents. And it's like, oh shit. Okay. So there were nails there that I was almost trying not to see that were there. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of nails. And as I say that, I should also point out that that's not me saying that everybody has dealt with an earth-shattering amount of trauma. It's important to differentiate between what we call big T trauma and little T trauma.
Mhm.
And your big T trauma is a lot of what you might typically have come to mind. Maybe being in a combat situation, car accident, earthquake, being assaulted in some way, anything where you might be nearly anything where there's risk of harm or serious harm or injury or even death, long
Mhm.
term being abused, those things I would absolutely categorize as your big T trauma. Little T trauma is a lot more subtle. It's when Your entire fifth grade class made fun of your clothes. It's when your boss called you in and chewed you out. And now every time you have a boss call you in, you're always thinking, oh shit, this is where I'm going to get fired, even if that's not at all what's going to happen. You're still having trauma responses, even if it wasn't big. And it's important to understand that, because I think a lot of times people are walking around carrying this trauma completely unaware that it's that's what they should be labeling it, but they can brush it off like, no, it's not trauma. It's not like I went through a big thing. It's just, it's just my boss or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. Team loses the big game, something like that. You just have trouble shaking it.
Yeah, I mean, especially like if something as you say that, even like I had a client who talked about how, and he thought, and again, this is one of those things where I tried to, part of what I have to do isn't just getting people to, acknowledge their trauma, but like give themselves permission to feel it. And so he had parents that were pretty demanding. They were never overtly abusive, but they would, he the way he described it was, he felt like every interaction with them was a transaction of some sort. And one of the memories that really stood out to him, and he wasn't sure why, and that was part of what we were able to work on over the course of a few weeks, was a time that he was in Little League. And apparently he had a bit of a funny run, the way he described it. And he was probably 8 or 9 years old at this point. And the way he describes his run is, he says, well, I was never really all that athletic. And I thought, if I want to run faster, I guess I should do what they do on TV. That's what he was modeling. That was the only model, the only frame of reference he had. So he was running like a cartoon character, like Roadrunner or Shaggy from Scooby-Doo or something. And so he had this funny looking run. And on the way home, Dad said, you looked really funny when you ran, you know that? And just kind of had a laugh at him. And what we were able to unpack from that, and the reason why it was so impactful, was his dad mocked him when he thought he was doing well. His dad didn't offer anything constructive. And it just kind of turned him off from wanting to run or do anything athletic after that. And it's funny because he didn't realize it until he came to therapy as a man in his mid-late 20s. Wow, that's how much impact that one memory had on my my self-esteem when it came to pursuing anything athletic after that. So yeah, like I said, it's little ways it affects us that we don't even realize.
It might come again out of my area of expertise, but it might come down to how much value you place in something as well. Like I when I said your big team losing the game, I meant that as a half joke. At the same time, people put a lot of value in the success of, their favorite sports teams or, individuals, things like that. And
and the general definition we use is like anything that changes. Oh, damn, I don't remember all the criteria it fits. It's on the top of my head. But anyway, like I said, it's my day off, so I'm not really thinking too therapist minded at the moment. But it's like anything that affects your view of the world, or view of yourself, or view of your ability to control a situation, to maintain your own personal safety in the situation. And so, while granted he wasn't unsafe, but it did skew his view of himself, having his dad just laugh at him and kind of punch down.
Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, it's the importance that's placed on it. And something else I try to tell people too is that it's not just that this bad, awful thing happens to us. I tell people trauma is not the problem. Unresolved trauma is what's the problem. You can go through something bad, but if you are able to appropriately process it in the way it needs to be, then you're usually able to avoid a bigger fire setting. Because the issue that we hold on, because long story short, like, because if something happens to us, we need to process through it. If we don't, then we kind of end up being emotionally stuck there. So a common hypothetical I might tell people, well, it's not even, well, I shouldn't say hypothetical because it happens. A common example I might share with people is, imagine a combat veteran serves a tour, loses one of his squad mates, and that's a close friend of his. That's his brother. Comes back home, he now probably is suffering that PTSD. He's probably abusing his family members and abusing substances to try to get to sleep. He's not sleeping well. He has to check every room of the house with a gun drawn before he can go to sleep, and all this stuff. Again, this doesn't happen to all veterans, of course. I'm just painting kind of a more extreme picture of what we might see. But the problem there isn't that he lost his friend. The problem there is that he wasn't giving himself a chance to feel the grief that was there, that is there. And how could he? Because his brain literally won't allow it in such a high stress, high danger situation because everything is so life or death there. And even though the majority of us don't face those kind of life or death situations, we might have reasons that we don't feel the emotions that we need to in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, other common examples might be, maybe you got one or more parents that's got a really bad temper. And so you learn to just not share your emotions because it might set them off. But it's easier than not sharing your emotions, ignoring them, pretending they're not there. And then, of course, that ends up having a whole lot of other long term issues there. But similar to that soldier, they're doing it because that is a means of survival.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I was curious too about your thoughts on like how social media has impacted both the way people, I guess, view dealing with trauma, but also the like negative impact it can have on people's experiences. Because you could come up with I don't know how many different examples of people going online getting bullied for any particular reason or just no reason at all. People can just be nasty. Um,
mm-hmm.
yeah,
No, and you're right that it is a mixed bag, because on the one hand, yes, there's the bullying, and there's the excuse me, there's the bullying, there's the all sorts of anxiety that happens from like body image issues, for example, advertising that happens, the fact that people usually go on social media and post only the best stuff, so that tends to skew what people's perceptions of others' lives are and make them
yeah,
think that their life is crap. And on the other hand, you do have a lot of positivity going out there, blogs and people going up there saying,
mm-hmm.
hey, like, it's important to go to therapy. I mean, like I said, like in the nearly decade and a half that I've been working as a professional, it's really encouraging to see the general shift that I'm seeing culturally, the general attitude that people have about therapy. You have people wearing T-shirts that say "Go to fucking therapy." That was not the case a decade and a half ago. You
Mm-hmm.
got people dropping in casual conversation saying, my therapist did this. I learned this in therapy. People are learning a lot more of the lingo and stuff, or maybe not lingo, but the jargon, I guess you could say, what the terminology, people using terms like coping skills, grounding skills, mindfulness. Those are terms that they were not nearly as commonplace a decade and a half ago, and yet they are now. And that to me is really encouraging. And some may think like, well, you got people who are abusing that language too. Yes, you're going to have people abusing that language, and that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
On the whole, though, I would still say my stance is educate the masses as much as possible on this. Educate them on terms, on what narcissism looks like, what gaslighting looks like, what anxiety looks like, what your depression looks like. Um, one of the things I really found great during the time I worked in a school, it was at a K-5 school, and they even had me coming in doing semi-regular presentations with mental health stuff with the students, coming in and teaching them certain coping skill exercises and grounding skills and whatnot. And I kind of had to remind myself, I'm really doing a job here, because it was a cushy job. I loved it. It was the kid, the little munchkins were so adorable and everything. Such a fun job. Um, because up until that point, so much of my career was helping other people put fires in their lives out. Whereas in this role, I was actually helping countless kids stomp out the embers before they took spark.
Yeah.
So I'm very optimistic about where the future of mental wellness is going to go. It's so much less stigmatized as well. There was a time where people used to think, oh, it's for crazy people. It's for people who think the
Mm-hmm.
Pentagon, or people who think that their dog is telling them to bomb the Pentagon or something. And it's like, no, it's just for people who need some help, getting through a breakup
They
or
view it as like a sign of weakness too, where it's like that guy
yes,
needed to go to therapy, like be a
yeah,
man, sort of a thing.
yes. Like, I guess I guess another way to phrase it is that we're becoming more comfortable with the idea of acknowledging, and in some cases even expressing one's vulnerabilities. We all have
Mm-hmm.
vulnerabilities. The kind of people that say they don't have any, you don't want to spend time with those people because they have them. They're just ignoring them. Um, but the first step to being able to resolve it is just being able to acknowledge what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of going back to the again more towards my wheelhouse, so I'm able to speak on it a little bit more. Just like with the internet,
Sure.
it's not just like bullying. It's just I know you mentioned too, like there's a lot of positivity out there, but just the way that everything is designed to keep you on certain pages and websites and things like that, like
Mm-hmm.
news articles, for example, just anything that is attention grabbing or, you know, it's meant to invoke a reaction, and it can just be super negative just in order to keep people there. I'm sure that's wildly unhealthy as well.
It is, and that's something else. Like I'm going to deal with clients as well, that they'll just kind of get sucked into this, scroll hole of just like going through TikTok, Twitter, whatever,
Mhm.
and I'll and I get why they do it, because they're like, I'm tired, and I just worked, and I feel like I don't have the energy for other stuff, and I get it. Social media doesn't really ask a whole lot. Doing
Yeah.
hobbies, engaging with a person face to face, those do have they do have some demand, uh, but of course it's one of those reap what you sow sort of things. Like if you're going to devote time to a hobby, to a passion,
Mhm.
yeah, you are putting in time and energy that you may or may not have. But in my experience, it tends to be pretty reinvigorating. So that's what I try to let them know. Like, I get it. Like, so I try, usually my the first solution I try to talk through with them is, if what you need is just a moment to decompress after work, maybe set a timer, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 minutes or whatever. And if you feel like you've done enough decompression at that point, then move on to something else.
Makes sense. I know one of the things you had mentioned early on too in this part of the discussion was like the ketamine treatment.
Yeah.
Do you work directly with people when they're doing that, or is that just people that just a formality where people happen to be doing that as well that come in then next to work with you?
So I haven't worked a lot with them. Do you mean like
Okay.
privately, like while they're under the influence of it?
I mean, maybe I have no idea. uh,
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a few ways they can go about. Usually it's, I'll see them maybe a day or two after. Sometimes if we're able to, if I'm able to catch them, I can get it with them while they're like just coming off of it. Um, I'm because I'm still fairly new to the psychedelics world. As far as using it medically, I um, am still like looking to get like trained and certified and being able to do private ketamine sessions, meaning like the person can be dosed and then be in my office while they're under its influence, and then I can, some clients, like I've been able to sit in on some of my colleagues when they're doing these private ketamine sessions, and it's
mhm.
interesting. People are just really quiet. Other people are talking through every step of their journey that's happening. Some people just need reassurance. Some people move around a lot. Other people just kind of sit still.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I have no personal experience with this, but my understanding of it is it's like they take like a pill, right? And the whole point is to get them as relaxed as possible and just kind of talk them through it while they
Um,
sit there and kind of explain what they're seeing,
well, a lot of people
experiencing.
just do it by themselves. Like we have, like, because
Mhm.
it is more costly if you're going to do a private session, meaning you have the practitioner in the room with you.
Mhm.
But a lot of times, usually they're doing it, and then we'll have a medical team that are observing them in their private rooms, where they'll be by themselves, or in some cases they'll have a trusted family member in there with them. There are four methods of being able to administer it. There's a sublingual lozenge, inhaling it intravenously, and intramuscular.
Interesting. Okay.
And yeah, and so the way it works is that, like, they all have their different varying effects as far as like the bioavailability and the effectiveness and whatnot. But like, generally speaking, what the practitioners are aiming for is a sweet spot of where it works. Because if it's too little, all it really does is work as more of like an analgesic, and if it's too
Mhm.
much, it'll send them into what they call the K hole, where they are just
Mhm.
completely dissociated from their mind and body. It's generally not an unsafe place to be, but it's not helpful. If you can find that
Right.
sweet spot that's in between, where it ends up being a psychedelic, that's where they can get some good out of it. And like, and if they're in the private session, sometimes they might want to be talked through it. A lot of times, they're just by themselves. It's very highly recommended that they wear an eye mask and have some kind of music that they can go along with it,
Yeah.
which shouldn't be surprising, because that has its traditional roots very much based in native tribes, where they would do their spirit journeys using
Mhm.
their medical psychedelics like ayahuasca or something, and music is a
Yeah.
huge part of that for them as well.
Nice. Yeah. My only quote unquote experience with it is hearing someone talk about it, and they did it at home
Hmm.
where I might mess this up, but I think what they explained was they would just they had, I don't know if it was like one pill. They took pill or pills, and they would just lay in bed. I think they had like an eye cover on, and they had headphones that they put in, and it was just relaxing music. And I think
Mm-hmm.
someone was talking to them, like walking them through. It was like pre-recorded, but it was just walking them through it essentially while they were laying there. And then as soon as it was done, like they would, I forget if it was afterwards or during, he would just take notes, writing down like what he was experiencing, and then he
Yeah.
would talk to the company that he worked with, and kind of go over his experience.
Yeah, no, and that's not too far from what it is. Like I said, I don't know if he's just getting really relaxed or if he's in that psychedelic sweet spot there. And people have different experiences with it. Sometimes it's just
Mhm.
immensely relaxing. Sometimes they have something as vivid as I have a colleague who has utilized it, and he said that during one of his first experiences, he went in with an intention, which is something that's often it's very highly recommended. Going with some kind of an intention to learn something about yourself or to gain
Mhm.
something, and he wanted to become more in touch with his inner child. And this isn't
Interesting.
a common occurrence, but the experience he had was having an actual conversation with his 12-year-old self.
Hmm. Seems like
Yeah.
it'd be an interesting scenario to find yourself in.
It is, yeah, and it's something I haven't dabbled in myself, but I do plan on it because all the trainings I've undergone have said that while not necessary, it's very helpful. It's beneficial for professionals to undergo it themselves so that they can understand what their clients are going through. They can be reassuring to their clients who maybe haven't done it
Makes sense.
themselves. Yeah,
Yeah. No,
and
it
yeah,
does make
and
sense.
yeah, and I would certainly get some kind of benefit out of it because we're kind of. I guess I can pivot a little bit here and say that when I talk about trauma with people, I'm not just teaching them as a professional. I've got my own that I've gone through, and long story short, the bulk of my trauma is largely rooted in the fact that when I was young, I was about 9 or 10 when my mother was diagnosed with brain cancer.
Hmm.
And the prognosis was that she'd survive 2 years, but she actually ended up surviving about 11 years. And to be honest, it wasn't a very pleasant 11 years. So I'm growing
Hmm.
up during my formative years without a proper mother figure in my life through no fault of her own. She was
Hmm.
an invalid. So my dad effectively had to be a single parent through all that. And so that did cause quite a bit of trauma. And so when I try to tell my clients about what they're going through, even if it's not, even if what they experienced is not anything like the grief I went through, even if it's something
Hmm.
like, addiction or, being assaulted or something like that, there's a lot of the same patterns that are followed about, with people, avoiding their trauma or people finding ways to numb themselves to it in a way that they don't know, like, because with trauma often follows a lot of shame, and shame is a real twisted son of a bitch that kind of convinces you that, like, it makes you insecure. It convinces you that things are wrong that aren't. That's where you get a lot of that imposter syndrome you hear about. That's, someone dealing with that shame, it tends to be a lot more aggressive, a lot more defensive. They'll blame others, they'll blame themselves unfairly for things, and that's where I was with that. I try to tell people this is how unreasonable shame can be. Shame caused me to think that my mom getting cancer was my fault somehow, and I can expand on that a bit if you want.
Sure. Yeah. No, I was just going to touch on something real quick too. Is that like
Yeah.
it's definitely not the same experience compared to yours at all. But like
Mm-hmm.
when I was 8, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia, and
Yeah.
that was brutal. It just, my parents were already split up by that point. Like they separated
Yeah.
before I can remember. Um, but yeah, like I just remember like Christmas Day going to see him, and like that, like sitting there with his side of the family, and hanging out with them while they're like dragging him out of the house to help rush him over to the hospital to get treatment because he's having some sort of an issue. And yeah, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. Um, One, just being completely useless, just sitting there like, there's nothing I can do to help in this situation. And
Mm-hmm.
then especially at that age too, just not knowing really what's going on, and part of it is just not being old enough to understand it, and part of it is my parents not wanting to drag me into the actual mess of the situation. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a mess.
No, and it is a tough situation to be in, and there might have been. I mean, I'm kind of being a little presumptuous here, but it wouldn't surprise me if during any of that you might have at some point thought irrationally, so very emotionally, so this is my fault somehow. And so kind
I
of
don't
going
know that I
back up.
ever thought that. I
Okay.
feel like I was just like scared for my dad, essentially.
Okay. Which
Again,
is fine. Yeah.
this is over 20 years ago. I don't recall specifically. But
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Well, like I said,
yeah,
it was a little presumptuous on my part, but it is. I will say it's common though for people to, when you go through
it
something
makes
really
sense.
that tough. I would say one of the most common, like at least maybe not the most common, but one of the more like commonly known examples of this is if a kid's parents go separate ways. There's a reason why they tell the parents make sure that kid knows it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Okay, because people, children in particular, have a tendency to blame themselves when things happen, that when real drastic awful things happen that are out of their control. They'll think, if I were a good boy or a good girl, mommy and daddy wouldn't need to go separate ways. If I were good enough to stay together, they would stay together. And that's an awful thing for a kid to think.
Yeah.
And that's usually what they're going to think by default, if they don't have somebody to properly remind them, no, it's not your fault. We're doing this because rationally, does a 6-year-old really have any control over what his parents are going to decide? No, but they will blame themselves as a way of fooling themselves into thinking they have a semblance of control over this otherwise very chaotic life going on. So
Mm.
back to my example, how the hell did I think that it was my fault that my mom got cancer? It was a weird, irrational thought that occurred to me when I was at the symphony. I'm not a symphony guy, but I had to go for school credit. And my mom was a very talented violinist, and they had a violin solo happening. And I just remember thinking, like, what a shame that such a beautiful talent, being my mom, had to be taken off this earth. And it's really awful that I'm the reason for that. And like, it's the spiral that my mind went down in that moment caused me to cry uncontrollably in the middle of the symphony. I've never had an experience like that before that. I've had a couple after that, prior to actually going to therapy and being able to appropriately work through my grief. Because as I told you earlier, the problem with trauma isn't that it happened. The problem with it is when it's unresolved. So here I was ignoring my grief, and I think I don't think I talked about it with a therapist for about 8 years after her actual passing.
Yeah.
Um, but where was I? Right. So the way that my mind connected these dots in a very, again, irrational way was thinking it was my fault. Sorry, before I do that, I need to back up a little bit and explain that something that my dad always mentioned was that he would describe my mom as very lenient with her parenting, lenient to the
Mhm.
point of when he'd come home from work, he'd see toys on the floor and he'd say, "All right, kids, time to pick this up." And then she'd come in and intervene and be like, "No, no, no, don't do that. Don't make him do that." And I guess she was afraid that we'd disrespect her and that we'd hate her or something if she
Mm.
didn't,
Interesting.
if she, yeah, which that's a fairly normal thing to expect from your kids. Yeah, okay, you played with your toys, pick them up, put them in your room, play with them another time. Now I don't remember this too vividly, but and the reason I bring that up is because the way that my mind was spiraling during this symphony was thinking it was my fault that she's gone, my fault that this beautiful violin talent got taken off the planet. Why? Why did it happen? Well, I think God himself had to put a tumor in her brain in order to sideline her so that dad could step in and raise me properly. How bad of a kid was I that it required cancer as an intervention to actually set me on track? And so then it made me, that's how I started feeling like it was my fault.
Mhm.
And that's one of the many twisted ways that shame sneakily will convince you it's your fault. That was my way of trying to feel like I was in control of something in my life that is chaotic. It's and that's a dangerous, that's a harmful thing to route to go down, to think that you're in control of things that you're not.
Yeah. No, that's rough. Yeah. No, I don't know. I feel like there's probably no perfect way to go about dealing with it.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And I mean, there's definitely been scenarios in my life where it's just like, it sucks. Like I'm in a terrible situation. I mean, thinking back to
Yeah.
like middle school and stuff. I mean,
Hmm.
everyone goes through crap in middle school because everyone is, it's their formative years trying to figure themselves out, how
Right.
they fit into the world, I suppose. And yeah, it can be a real mess.
No.
I don't
Yeah.
want to put your story down at all, but I couldn't help but think that there's probably someone on stage during the performance seeing you cry in the audience and taking that as like the ultimate compliment. Like they just brought out so much emotion in you.
Like, man, I kick ass at this.
Like they're just like this. Like we're doing such a good job. Like this is
No,
incredible.
I appreciate your consideration, trying to be like, yeah, this is a funny thought. I don't want to be inconsiderate. Like I don't want to be rude. No, I think it's hilarious. I mean, my humor was pretty dark even before I got
Mm.
into mental health, and it's only gotten darker, frankly, because it's the only way to to keep your head above water.
Yeah.
Um, no, but like it's funny. Even as you mentioned the formative years, that's a good segue, I think, into a couple points I was gonna bring up, which is like I feel like I'm the past 5ish years or so, I'm in a stage of having to rediscover again. Because one thing I know I mentioned to you was that I've been in a pretty significant faith transition the past few
Mm.
years, having stepped away from the Mormon faith that I was raised in. And anyone who's familiar with it knows it is a very peculiar, very odd, high demand religion. And I look back on that too and think, like, I don't want to blame the church directly for some of the like thoughts and like the shame based thoughts that I had, those irrational beliefs I had about my part in things, because yeah, no church leader would ever tell me, yeah, Michael, this was your fault. But like, I think just having that perspective of, all things being connected and, God having a hand in all things. I mean, like I said, I literally thought that he put that tumor in her head.
Mhm.
And I also, she passed away at the time I was, you may be aware of the traditional 2-year missions that they tend to serve, to go proselyte, spread the word and all
Okay.
that. I was serving a
Yeah.
mission in Mexico at the time. And because of the shame I was dealing with, she passed away while I was in Mexico. And because of the shame, I elected not to attend her funeral services, which I
Mm.
do regret doing. And at the time, I thought it was an act of nobility. And I do want to, and again, like I said, I don't want to blame anybody but myself for that, because no one was at fault for it. Not the leadership on my mission, not my dad, certainly. In fact, I even kind of intercepted him before he had a chance to ask me what my plans were. And I told him, actually, I'm planning on staying here. And I realized it was, it wasn't until the 8, 9 or so years later that I, that I didn't, that I realized, oh, that was a form of avoidance. But I thought I was doing it nobly. I thought I was doing it, like, no, I'm a missionary, for Christ. This is what he wants me doing. And then my mom, when she was younger, served a mission similar, just in northern Mexico. I was in southern Mexico. When I mentioned it to my dad, he said, "Oh, that's a pretty neat way to honor your mom when you think about it. Continue serving these people that she loves so much." And I thought, yeah, that's great. So,
Mhm.
like, that's what I say when, like, if I needed to avoid it, I suppose that in itself isn't a bad thing. Although I don't think that's what I needed. That's what I probably thought I needed, but I disguised it, like I said, as something more noble. Like I had an excuse. It's kind of like, if maybe you deal with this yourself. People who are, if their livelihood depends on their artistry, maybe they write, maybe they paint or something. Whenever they're
Mhm.
in a rut, they go and they clean the hell out of their bathroom, and it's spotless, or they fold their socks, or they do something to get their mind off it. And it's like, they're
Mhm.
procrastinating it, but they're not just sitting there doing nothing. So they're kind
Yeah.
of convincing themselves, like, well, I can't work. I have all this laundry to do. Of course I have to, so it's finding a suitable face level, excuse that
Mhm.
and that's kind of what I found myself doing, because I was conditioned to think there's literally nowhere else better for you right now. Like just a month prior, the guy that was presiding over the mission that I was in gave a whole talk about, like, I have missionaries come to me all the time. President, I gotta go. My sister's in the hospital. Are you a doctor? This is where you need to be. My parents are getting divorced. Are you a lawyer? This is where you need to be. And so I had that voice in my head thinking, like, okay, mom died. Well, I can't really help with that. So I'm just going to be here because this is where I need to be. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not blaming them for the decision I made, but I am blaming them for the conditioning that that did lead me to make that decision as easily as I did, because god damn it, I probably should have just gone back home.
Yeah. No, I mean, I I've never been in that situation specifically, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a mindset at times. Like I grew up like my grandparents would watch me over the weekend, and
Hmm.
then every Sunday morning, then I'd go to church with them, and I know that was one of the big things to like push me to go through and become a member of the church and everything. They were it's a Christian church,
Hmm.
and there was always somehow a definitive answer for everything, which I didn't care. I mean, even as I the last time I went to the church was probably like 11 years old.
Hmm.
Um, but even as a child, I was like, I don't like that there's like a specific answer for for every possible scenario. I'm like, that doesn't seem realistic. And that, and just, I don't know, it, I don't want to sit here and trash talk people's religion or anything, but
Sure.
at the same time, I don't know, just a lot of the having an answer for everything rubbed me the wrong way. Because I was like, there's so many situations in life where there's just no way you can have a, yep, this is exactly what happened. This is how this is dealt with. It's like,
Mhm.
it
What's an
can't
example
be
of
the
that? I'm
case.
curious. I'm curious what you mean by having an, because
So,
like I guess I'm the kind of person that probably would prefer an answer, but
yeah,
maybe
no,
it's not like.
I can give you a specific scenario. Like when my dad got sick, you know, I'd be going to church with them in the mornings, and they'd be like, oh well, you know, we'll pray for him and everything will get better. I'm like, but he's in the hospital. It's been weeks and weeks. Clearly, this isn't working. And they're like, well, it'll be fine though. I'm like, I'd rather trust the doctors to do their job, you know,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. It just, I I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way in that case. There was an instance later on in life actually where back when I was at the grocery store punching poop down the toilets,
Yeah.
there was a woman that had I forget what actually the specific case. We'll say it was like a heart attack. It was something like that, and like these I forget who it was. Not my family, so I'm not in. You know, I don't have the specific details, but I just remember her coming back later on and saying like they, you know, these doctors came in and did like all this extra work to help take care of her. And the my one coworker's response was like, "Yeah, see, it's proof that prayer works." And I got really upset by that. I was like, these people just, you know, did all this stuff to help her out, and you're just deflecting from their efforts. And I just didn't care for it. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's something that I feel, affected my life as well. Is like when it's having to like really really recognize, hey, the people that don't adhere to my specific faith, things seem to be working out for them as well.
Mm.
So like, does it need to, like, does every, like, I think like I think part of my, my transition was kind of realizing like where the truth, how it was getting mixed in
Mhm.
with what the deception, like, and again, I don't, I'm not trying to trash anyone's beliefs. So like, but I
That's
also
why
like
you
it's,
transitioned to Scientology, right?
wouldn't, that, wouldn't that be something? I think I've told people kind of cheekily, I'm like, I guess I'm agnostic Christian. And I don't
Yeah,
even know if it's because I firmly
I
adhere
would
to
love to
Christian.
see that transition story told, where it's like on it, like regardless of the original one, just be like, you know what, this is kind of ridiculous, and I don't know how we can be a part of this. Praise be to Xenu. You know,
Xenu had it
just,
right.
yeah,
But
like
like,
I don't know how you guys could believe that, but like clearly, Tom Cruise is right, and you know he's
no,
making it in life.
but it does feel like it discredits, when people praise everything to, to God, like, and like,
Mhm.
and that's at a point where like, and I'm trying to not be as irritated by it, but I do find
Yeah.
myself where it's like, thank God for this beautiful day, and it's like, or you can just acknowledge it's a beautiful day,
Mhm.
thank God that, these paramedics came, or thank the paramedics, thank God I had the insight that, like, there's times where like, one common one that I never realized, but I've, but when I'm talking with other people on forums, was they said, yeah, believing that I was being guided at certain times was actually diminishing my own gut instincts, my own intuition. And I'm like, holy shit, yeah. There were so many times where like an answer would come to me and it'd be like, ah, well, that was clearly the spirit of Christ telling me what to do. And it's like, or again, I just had the intuition that told me what to do, and 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 I went with it, and it made sense, and it worked out. So I don't necessarily need to pray over like a meal to be thankful for the meal. I can just take a minute and just really appreciate. You know what? I might go without this meal. I
Mhm.
could, there in another timeline. I could have been without this, but I've got it, and I'm going to be grateful for it now. I don't necessarily have to, you know, associate the thanks with any one particular being for it. I can just acknowledge this is good.
Mhm. Yeah, I used to be a lot more harsh about it. Like there was a point in time where I'd tell people, I'm like, if you're so sure about it, why even keep your hands on the steering wheel? You know, it'll all get taken care of for you. Uh,
Yeah.
I
Well,
try and avoid being that rude at this point.
yeah, I'm a bit too old. I mean, I will say that when I tend to get most, even heated seems a bit much, but like passionate, let's say, it usually is with my father. And it's, and like, and then some people, like, I can see where, like, some of the forums I've been talking with people will kind of swap parent stories, they had some absolute shit heels for parents. And I'm like, no, that wasn't my dad though. He was, often gentle, always authoritative, rarely being an asshole about stuff. I mean, we all have our flaws here and there, but like, no, I can honestly look back and say, no, that man, he's a good man. And that's part of what made it so hard for me to eventually, see this religion in a negative light, because he still is a practicing believer, and he is a man of immense integrity. Again, we don't see eye to eye on things, but at no point is he somebody that sets out to, dominate another person. He's not that type. He's a good person. He acts in good faith with everything he does. And so it's like, oh, well, it works for him, so he says it works for everyone, then it must work for everyone. And it's like, no, just because it works for some doesn't mean it works for all. And like you said, like, and I still, of course, have to be considerate of that, not just personally, but professionally as well. Like, I'm not gonna, if someone comes in and says, I'm still, part of that particular faith, I'm not gonna start trashing it in any way. No, I'm gonna, I'm gonna support them, because like, if it really genuinely helps them, then of course, why would I want to do anything to diminish that?
Yeah, no, it sounded, you were talking about that. It reminded me of my grandfather, who's very much the same way, where it's just he's that guy that goes to church every single Sunday. But I don't know your personal experiences, but like my grandfather's case, you wouldn't even know, if he'll say like he goes to church. If you didn't hear him say that, you wouldn't know. Like, there's nothing about him that would say like this is a Christian guy. Where like he's just a very decent person, Yeah. And I don't know. I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I do have to wrap up here in just a minute. So I don't know if there's anything you want to touch on real quick before we.
No, nothing really. No, I think we hit a lot of spots though. But I mean, if I guess I had to wrap up anything, I'd just say, yeah, just kind of with what we started with, that trauma thing. Like, yeah, if you've got it, there's no shame in acknowledging it, no shame in being vulnerable about it. You got it. Our emotions need to get out. And another analogy, and I have a bunch of them, but one I think might be appropriate to end on is one of my go-to analogies for the clients I work with is comparing needing to let your emotions out like a hot dog in the microwave. Most people, hopefully, if you're going to put one in the microwave, you perforate some holes in it with a fork first, because both hot dogs are going to get exposed to the same pressure, but one of them has outlets for it. The other one is going to make its own. And it's when it splits and starts flicking its own chunks of meat all over the wall and everything, like, it's going to get out either way. But one you are more in control of, and the other one, it's in control. When I was having that moment in the symphony, that was my hot dog splitting, so to speak. So just a fun little analogy.
It's a very nice one. I've never heard of people microwaving hot dogs, but I can appreciate the analogy. It does make sense.
Well, yeah, if you don't believe, yeah, I mean, you definitely, you can do your own little experiment at home, even like put one in for an amount of time, see how long it takes to split, put another one in with holes poked in it with a fork about 3 or 4 times, and then
wrap another one in aluminum foil and see what happens. This one's really contained. It's being smothered, you could say.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not the tastiest way to cook hot dogs, but if you want it warm now, that's what you can do.
Fair enough. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really had a great time chatting. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Where can people go to check out your stuff?
Yeah, so again, the name of the podcast is Oh Crap, Our Fecal Misfortunes and Foibles. That subtitle's necessary because there is another Oh Crap podcast out there, but it's about potty training. So ours is a lot more silly.
Probably won't want to get those mixed up. People tuning in trying to help raise their kids, and they're hearing about some guy like flooding the toilet at his girlfriend's or something.
Yeah. You'll find it. Again, the Misfortunes and Foibles, you can't mistake it. We got like a little Pixar looking cartoon, like living toilet as our thumbnail. And then our socials, we're on Facebook under the same name, and then we're on Instagram under O_crap_podcast.
And links,
and that's O is an OH.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So give it a listen if you need a laugh. I guess another recommendation would be, you and I were talking about how, early podcast episodes being lacking in quality. Starting with episode 5, that's a good bet. Anything episode 5 or beyond, that's where we get more into our groove, and that's where the audio quality vastly improves. So anything after that, anything that or beyond, you're solid. I got nothing else to say.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate you taking the time coming on. It's a great time to chat.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And you don't have to keep this part in. Any chance that you might be able to slip me the audio of your toilet experience there, because that is like prime material for my cast.
Sure. Yeah. I'll write that down. I'll get
We
that
can
over
like
to you.
do a little do or maybe like post it up. I don't know if you're on any socials, but if you were to post it and like tag me, if you were to post that little clip or something,
Mhm.
it's very much my brand. So
Yeah, I'll do something with that for you. I'll get it sent over to you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. All
Awesome.
right. Well, yeah.
Thank
Enjoy
you
your
everyone for
weekend, man.
listening. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.